Welcome back to the Elevate Church online experience. For those of you joining for the first time, a special welcome to you. If you haven't done it yet and you'd like to keep being involved, don't forget to like and subscribe. So our worship partner this week is Influence Music. The words will be on the screen, so have a sing along.
Cause God is my champion and He fights for me. God is my champion and He fights for me. Bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay. Cause you're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000. Whoa, oh, oh. Whoa, oh, oh. You cannot slay, cause you're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000. Bigger the battle, greater my faith. There is no giant you cannot slay, cause you're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000. You're stronger than 10,000 armies. You're stronger than 10,000.
This is my worship. This is my offering. In every moment, I withhold nothing. I'm learning to trust you, even when I can't. can see it. And even in suffering, I have to believe it. If you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll begin. And when you say to jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. I don't wanna follow my own way. I'm done chasing feelings. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. It felt like a burden, but once I could grasp it, you took me further, further than I was asking. And simply to see you, it's worth it all. My life is an altar. Let your fire fall. If you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll begin. And when you say to jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. Teach me how to follow in your way. I'm done chasing feelings. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead. Spirit, lead me. When all hope is gone and your word is all I've got, I have to believe you still bring water from the rocks to satisfy my thirst, to love me at my worst. And even when I don't remember, you remind me of my word. I don't trust my ways. I'm trading in my thoughts. I lay down everything, 'cause you're all that I want. I've landed on my knees. This is the cup you have for me. And even when it don't make sense, I'm gonna let your spirit lead. I'm gonna let your spirit lead. Yeah. I'm gonna let your spirit lead. I'm gonna let your spirit lead. And if you say it's wrong, then I'll say no. If you say release, I'm letting go. If you're in it with me, I'll begin. And if you say to jump, I'm diving in. If you say be still, then I will wait. If you say to trust, I will obey. You're the only truth, the light, the way. I'm done chasing feelings. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. Spirit, lead me. I'm gonna let your spirit lead. 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 I'm gonna let your spirit lead.
This is week 2 of our series, You'll Be Glad You Did, spoken by Steve Hall.
Hey everybody, Andrew Stanley here. We are out and about for the You'll Be Glad You Did series. We're giving out free advice, and also I'm hoping to get some free advice. So, really hoping that we'll be glad we did this. Hi. How's it going?
Good.
Andrew.
Marcus.
Thank
You for getting ready to give me some advice.
I was hoping that you would give me advice.
Okay. Always attend church when you can.
Yeah, I've received that. Have you always followed that?
These days, you know, with technology, you don't physically have to be at a church location.
Yes,
you
you
can watch
do.
it online.
I'm very unassertive, and I want to be more assertive.
Yeah.
So how can I do that?
Even if you don't know everything, act like you know everything and you'll learn it on your way.
I already knew that.
Yeah.
How can I be a better listener?
You're good at that.
Because
That's
I feel like
possible.
listening is more like you have to talk enough in order to be able to listen.
You have to know what questions.
Because it's like
to
I
ask.
just like sometimes when I'm listening to somebody, I'm like I have a thought. I want to go ahead and say it, and I think maybe that is the right thing to do.
Sometimes it's
I think
okay.
that it's really about thinking what you're gonna say before the other person even finishes talking. But everybody's like, you gotta listen. And I'm like, but I'm too busy thinking. I'm getting married in 1 month.
Okay.
What advice can you give me?
Take your time deciding on if and when you want children.
I love that advice. My fiance will hate that advice.
Also, do a background check on him.
I had not thought of that, but it seems like that could solve some huge problems down the road.
What colleges do you think are the best?
I was at a homeschool convention. I don't really want to get into why, and they were advertising virtual from home college. So you kind of go your whole life. You get born and go to your house, your baby, and you do homeschool, right? And then it's like, oh no, homeschool's over. Got to go to college into the real world. Not so fast. Virtual reality college. You do that from home. Then you get a job where you work from home, and then you die at home, and you just never have to leave home.
You have a card. What's your name? We coming to see you.
Andrew Stanley.
He's not Andy Stanley. That's
You
not.
got some ID?
I know what he looks like.
No, I'm Andrew Stanley.
Oh, Andrew. But that's the same thing.
I'm always getting confused for that guy. What about money?
It's important to have money. It's
I agree.
important to save. It's important to use.
So budget.
You have to budget.
You budgeted and you'll be glad you did.
Yeah, because there's going to be rainy days, unfortunately. Unfortunately.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Sometimes I look at my account and I'm like, oh, it's been a bunch of rainy days lately. I guess I gotta start doing some more gigs for my dad.
You may have to budget a little bit more.
It's so good to be back here again, Elevate Church Online, beginning of 2024. And if you're like me, you are full bore ahead, looking to the future, got your strategic plans in place, and things are already starting to happen, unless you're still on holidays. But I want you to stop for a minute and do something you probably did in December. I want you to look back on last year and consider this question. What is it that you are glad you did? What is it that you were glad you did? Maybe last year you built a house and you're so glad, you're sitting there down going, I'm so glad we now got our own house. Maybe you changed jobs and you go to work and you're going, I'm so glad we changed jobs. Maybe you got married and you go, oh, so glad got married. Maybe you did something and invested in something and it's paying off today. And you say, I'm so glad we did it. Or maybe you're looking back and thinking, I wish I hadn't. Gee, I wish I hadn't got this house. I wish I hadn't got this mortgage. I wish I hadn't changed jobs. I wish I didn't get married. But if that's your case, I suggest you talk to somebody. But I want to ask you this question today. What is it that you are so glad that you did? Because we're doing a series at the moment, and the series is You'll Be Glad You Did. Timeless advice in troubled times. Can you remember some of that timeless advice you got, maybe as a child, maybe from your parents, maybe from your grandparents, maybe from a wise sage, maybe your pastor, maybe a teacher? I remember from my dad many, many years ago repeated the same phrase over and over again, timeless advice that I still use today. And that's this: if a job's worth doing, son, it's worth doing well. Timeless advice. And so we've been looking at that, and you've looked at the intro video, and today our timeless advice is this: listen. Listen. Now, if you're married or have a partner, this is probably something that you've heard a little bit. You know, those times when a conversation's going on and all of a sudden, especially if you're like me, a male who has a trouble doing two things at once, the question is, are you listening? I mean, I said that to someone on the phone the other day, a salesperson who was trying to sell me something, and I was saying no. And I said, are you listening? Because if you're in a relationship, the follow-up question is the one you don't want to hear. So what did I say? I think what part are you talking about? Here's the issue. Listening is one of the easiest things you'll ever do, and yet it's one of the hardest. A guy by the name of Dr. Ralph Nichols. He was known or nicknamed the father of listening. He was a lecturer at the Minnesota University and an author of a book, Are You Listening? Did you know he was also, and I've never heard of this before, he was part of the International Listening Association. That sounds pretty good. Be a lot of listening happening there. But in his book, he actually talks about a research that they did at the university. And they went out to a large manufacturers in Chicago, and they asked the people at this manufacturers, they said, we want to ask you about what you understand about listening. And they had a whole survey about listening. And from that, especially from the executive team, there were a number of comments. And this particular one stuck out. Let me read it to you. This was from one of the executives. It says, I've been thinking back about the things that have gone wrong over the last couple of years. And I suddenly realized that many of the troubles have resulted from someone not hearing something or getting it in a distorted way. See, the truth is that listening impacts your direction. Listening will impact how you respond. Ralph actually made this comment in a quote from his book. It says, the most basic of all human needs is the need to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. Another quote that I want to give you from a book called From the 7 Habits of Effective Leaders that I encourage you to read. And it was from Stephen Covey, who said this: most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. See, it's one thing to listen, and listening isn't just not talking, but listening is hearing. And I want to give you 5 different type of listeners that are there not for the intent to understand, but for the intent to reply. And one of those is the distractor. See, the distractor, they listen, but there's so much going on in their heads, so much happening. Maybe it's a problem at work, maybe it's a problem with the family, maybe it's something that's happening around, maybe it's a job I've got to do, maybe it's the phone that's ringing. But the distractors look like they're listening, but in their heads, something else is going on. Then there's the fixer. The fixer, you're talking to a fixer and all the time they're just working out, how do I fix this? In fact, they're trying to look at how do we correct what's gone wrong. So all the time they're just assessing. They're just listening, but their brain is thinking something else. Or there's the advisor, the counselor, who listens with the intent to try and give you advice, to try and tell you what you need to do. Or there's the competitor, The competitor is listening, but relating it back to them and trying to work out a story or something that they can actually add to what you're saying. Or then there's the dominator. The dominator is the person just waiting for a breath so that they can tell their story. The dominator are the ones that like to hear themselves rather than hear someone else. But listening is such a powerful thing, and something that, although it is easy, as we've said, sometimes can be hard. In fact, do you know, it takes 100 muscles to actually say a word, and there's only 10 muscles in your ear to hear, and yet we're all overachievers because we like to talk more than we like to listen. Let me give you the power of listening. If we could learn to listen, here are some growth areas. First of all, you will grow in wisdom. There's a guy called King Solomon. You've read the Bible, have been around church, you would have heard of him, but most people outside of that also have heard of King Solomon, the wisest man in the world. King Solomon, at the age of 20, was asked to be king, or was appointed king. And when he was dreaming one day and having a conversation with God, God said to him, Solomon, what is it you request? He could have asked for money, he could have asked for power, he could have asked for authority, he could have asked for anything, and this is what he asked for. He said, would you give me wisdom? And in giving him wisdom, he wrote a whole book we call the Proverbs, used in many places, of some great statements of wisdom. And in one of his Proverbs, Proverbs 12:15, he says, fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. He also said in Proverbs 19:20, listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise. I want to encourage you today and say to you that you'll be glad if we learn to listen, because your wisdom would grow. Your understanding of life, your understanding of who you are and who others are will grow if we could learn to really listen. Listen grows relationships. We understand, if you looked in Scripture all the way through, it talks about love, it talks about relationships, and in there is this whole ability of preferring the other person, learning to listen. Dietrich Bonhoeffer made this comment. He said, poor listening diminishes the other person, while good listening invites them to exist and to matter. When we listen to someone, we value them. When we listen to them intently with the idea of understanding, we are empowering them. Because when we encourage others to speak so that they grow in themselves, listening is a powerful tool in building relationship, but empowering other people. But I want to suggest one other reason why listening, you'll be so glad you did. And that's because it grows our faith. Now, I'm not sure what your faith might be, but let me tell you, there's a whole spirituality outside of who we are, and our faith will grow if we could learn the art of listening. In Romans, a book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Paul, the Apostle Paul, famous man, started the church, he made this comment. He said, so faith comes from hearing. That is, hearing the good news about Christ. Faith starts with hearing. Faith starts with that ability to listen. There's a great story in the Scripture. I love it because it's a great example to me. Because you see, there's a voice of God calling out in the heavenly realms. And it says he stands at the door and knocks, and he's waiting for us to hear that knock and to open it. He says that his sheep, or those that believe in him or belong to him, he knows their name and they know his name, because we hear, and in hearing empowers us to understand. But there's a great story, and you'll find it in the book of Matthew, one of the Gospels, one of the what we call the Gospels, or the re-encounterments of the disciples of the time of Jesus. And in this story, in Matthew, you find that Jesus has just heard that his good friend and his cousin, John the Baptist, has just been executed, his head chopped off. Jesus was pretty moved by that. It was obvious. He finished doing what he was doing, which was feeding a lot of people. It was a great miracle that day. And then he went alone by himself to deal with that emotion. This is God in a flesh, and yet he still takes time out to process. Well, whilst he's doing that, he sends his disciples on a cruise across the river. So his disciples or his friends, his group of followers, all jump into a boat. They're going across the river or the lake. And as they're there, a storm comes. Now, this storm is in that particular lake is huge. And so you can imagine there's a lot of shouting. There's a lot of, who's doing this? Watch out for that. Tie that down. Who's got this? And there's a lot of commotion happening as this boat is just in that place of being rocked backwards and forwards. And they're in a place of survival. I don't know about you, but I've been in that space. I've been in that space where the world just seems to be coming around and you're like, oh my goodness, if I could just survive today, I'd be happy. So they're out there in this storm, the storm of life, trying to survive, busy trying to work out how to get through this storm. And then they look up and they see this, what looks like a ghost walking on the water. And this figure shouts out, don't be afraid. It's me, it's Jesus. Okay, so one of the guys, his name is Peter, he stops what he's doing. I mean, it's a storm happening, but he stops what he's doing. He looks out and he says, and I'm going to pick it up in the scripture. It's in Matthew 14. You might like to open it up and have a look at it. It says, then Peter called to him, Lord, listen to this, if it's really you, tell me, speak, tell me to come to you, walking on the water. He says to him, prove to me, I want to hear your voice. I want to hear your voice to tell me to come. He's already said it's me, but if it's really you, tell me to come. You know, there's a time when we need to stop. There's a time when we need to be still. And there's a time when we need to listen. And then what Peter does, and I love this story, because then he says, Jesus says, okay, well, come, it is me. He walks out of the boat, and it says that he starts to walk on water. Whoa. And then once he realizes what he's doing, he starts to sink. Now listen to Jesus' response. His response isn't, oh, Peter, you drop kick. If you'd done that better, you'd be over here with me. He didn't say, oh, Peter, you just lack faith. You're no good. He didn't say, oh, Peter, mate, you've got a long way to go. He said, oh, you. In other words, oh, you look at this little faith. Oh, you of little faith. Look what little faith can do. It can step out on water. You see, when you hear God's voice and you hear the voice of the Spirit, if we could listen and just a little bit of faith steps out, then Jesus steps in the boat, and from that, the whole storm disappears. You see, it starts off with a little faith, and that little faith starts with listening. You know, listening doesn't just happen, and I want to just give you, just quickly, some ideas, not rules, but just some ideas, some conversation, some things that you might say, hey, I'm glad I did that. Things that may move you forward. Because if you're like me and you've been in that storms of life, these are the practices that I've put in, and I would encourage you to consider whether this is something you could do. The first one is this. If you really want to listen to the world, listen to others, listen to the Spirit, the first thing to do is be still. Do you remember the time there was a word called boredom? There was a time when you would stand in a busy line at a counter with nothing to do, and you might actually start talking to people in the line. Or the times when you used to step into a lift and there was quietness in the lift. See, nowadays we don't do that because we've all got this thing that's in our pockets that we pulled out that's got so much information, so many YouTubes, so many Spotify's, so many podcasts, and we're busy texting or listening, and this piece of equipment that is so powerful has taken away our boredom. In fact, it was said that after research was done by one of the big IT companies to find out how much people use their phone, they asked the question, when you're bored, what do you do? And 70% of people said they would pick up their phone. You see, we've come into a world that is so busy. There is so much information. There is so much to do that we struggle to be still. And that's not just still as in standing still. That's in being still in our life. It's such a hard thing to do. We live in such a busy world. And yet the psalmist encouraged us to be still and know. See, be still first, then you will know that I am God. I want to encourage you to actually, in the tensions of life, pay attention to the tensions and actually learn to be still. The key to listening is to put things down, put your worries down, put your pain down, put your concerns down, put the busyness of life down and be still. You know, recently I had lots of pressures, and in the office everyone knew I was stressed. Everyone knew because they could tell. I act differently. And I just said, I'm out of here. And I walked out the office, I jumped in my car, I went up onto the hills, I sat in my car and I fell asleep. And then I went for a walk and I sat on a rock because I just needed to be still. We need to learn to put things down and walk away. But we need to be quiet. Bonhoeffer also said this, he says, silence facilitates the expansion of the soul. It's when we are silent, we listen, feel, and connect to our higher self and raise the level of our awareness. In the old song of Simon and Garfunkel, silence is golden. Or in the words of the great monks, silence is God's language. It's not just an external silence. It's actually an internal silence. When I'm listening to someone, there's so much going on in my head. There's so many words, there's so many voices. In my head, there's so much noise. And we need to practice being silent, putting those things down. One of the great ways of being silent is to help us listen, is to ask questions of clarification of those that are speaking to us. And that's the same with God. We need to learn to be still, and we learn to be silent. But here's the third beatitude that I want to suggest, as they are all B's, and that's be present. See, there's a posture of listening, and that posture is being present. You ever spoken to someone and you're thinking to yourself, you're not really here. You're somewhere else. You're on the footy team. You're at home. You're at your work still. We need to be present, and we need to find that posture. And one of that postures of presence is to unfold your arms, have eye contact, actually be present. Too often I see people walking around and I've been in my car where the passenger has got those things called earpods in their ears, and you're thinking, you're not really listening to me. There's something else going on. Or all of a sudden they tap their ear and they start talking to somebody because they're not present. You know, we need to take those earplugs out of our ears. We need to stop listening to YouTubes and put it down and be present with other people. Maybe park a few things and learn to be present. But here's the final thing I'd like to give you, and that's be practiced. In other words, listening is something you have to practice. It's a muscle that we have to put into place. It's something that we need to practice every day now. I find 5 minutes just to be still and to breathe. Because silence and quietness helps me hear those things around us. learning to listen doesn't happen overnight. It requires discipline, effort, and intentionality. So I think you'll be glad you did if you stopped and learnt the practice of listening. To be still, to be quiet, to be present, and to practice.
At Elevate, we love to give, and if you'd like to today, the links are down below. Thanks for watching today, guys. Don't forget to tune in next week for part 3 of our new series.